Star, and they launched a special web program today on the internet to reach 1 million young people. And I wanted to show you the advertisement for it because it made me feel very good. And this is it. Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, David Lynch, and Russell Simmons coming together to teach 1 million at-risk youth to meditate. Isn't that interesting? I mean, in other words, what they're trying to do is get people, especially young people, to, find some peace inside of themselves, and allow that to begin to grow. Of course, McCartney and Starr are long. Remember when they were with the what was that guy's name? Huh?
John Lennon.
Yeah, but no, I know the Beatles. I know that. But what I was saying, they were Maharishi Yoga or something like that, whatever you saw. So that's very good. And I was glad about that. Second thing I wanted to share with you is I want to read you 2 stories. Well, actually have you read along with me. They were sent to me by a young fellow by the name in California. His name is Richard, and he's really been helping me for years. And I'm thinking about giving him his own little web page on our site because he's really a neat kid. And I shouldn't call him a kid, young man. But he sent me a story. And there's 2 stories, really. And I thought they were nice. And maybe we could read them together, kind of be like story time with Uncle Don. I don't know how. Do you remember, anybody here remember Uncle Don? Well, I'm old enough, probably the only one here that could remember. But Uncle Don was a very, very famous children's radio show way, way back. Way, way back. And his career came to an abrupt end one day. And he said, okay, kiddies, you're Uncle Don now. Go to bed and take care of Mommy and Daddy and do what they say. And we'll see you with your Uncle Don next week. Well, before they cut the mic out, he said, that ought to hold the little B. And you figure, well, yeah. That was the end of Uncle Don. And I don't know whatever became of Uncle Don. But anyhow, this is the letter, not a letter, but this is the stuff that Richard sent. And many years ago, Al Capone virtually owned Chicago. Capone wasn't famous for anything heroic. He was notorious for enmeshing the Windy City in everything from bootleg booze and prostitution to murder. Capone had a lawyer nicknamed Easy Eddie. And he was Capone's lawyer for a good reason. Eddie was very, very good. In fact, Eddie's skill at legal maneuvering kept Big Al out of jail for a long time. To show his appreciation, Capone paid him very well. Not only was the money big, but Eddie got special dividends as well. For instance, he and his family occupied a fenced-in mansion with live-in help and all of the conveniences of the day. The estate was so large it filled an entire Chicago city block. Eddie lived the high life of the Chicago mob and gave little consideration to the atrocities that went on around him. Eddie did have one soft spot, however. He had a son that he loved dearly. And Eddie saw to it that his young son had clothes, cars, and a good education. Nothing was withheld. Price was no object. And despite his involvement with organized crime, Eddie even tried to teach him right from wrong. Eddie wanted his son to be better man than he was. Yet with all his wealth and influence, there were 2 things he couldn't give his son. He couldn't pass on a good name or a good example. One day, Easy Eddie reached a difficult decision. Easy Eddie wanted to rectify wrongs he had done. He decided he would go to the authorities and tell the truth about Al Scarface Capone, clean up his tarnished name, and offer his son some semblance of integrity. And to do this, he'd have to testify against the mob. And he knew that the cost would be great, so he testified. Within the year, Easy Eddie's life ended in a blaze of gunfire on a lonely Chicago street. But in his eyes, he had given his son the greatest gift. The greatest gift at the greatest price he could ever pay. Police removed from his pockets a rosary, a crucifix, a religious medallion, and a poem clipped from a magazine. The clock of life is wound but once, and no man has the power to tell just when the hands will stop, at later early hour. Now is the only time you own. Live, love, toil with a will, place no faith in time, for the clock may soon be still. And it did. It stilled for Eddie, and I appreciate Richard sending that one. And he sent another one too that I wanted to share with you, and this one will take a second. World War II produced many heroes. One such man was Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare. This is really interesting. He was a fighter pilot assigned to the aircraft carrier Lexington in the South Pacific. One day, his entire squadron was sent on a mission, and after he was airborne, he looked at his fuel gauge and realized that someone had forgotten to top off his fuel tank. He would not have enough fuel to complete his mission and get back to his ship. His flight leader told him to return to the carrier, and reluctantly he dropped out of formation and headed back to the fleet. As he was returning to the mothership, he saw something that turned his blood cold. A squadron of Japanese aircraft was speeding its way toward the American fleet. The American fighters were gone on a sortie, and the fleet was all but defenseless. He couldn't reach his squadron and bring them back in time to save the fleet, nor could he warn the fleet of the approaching danger. There was only one thing to do. He must somehow divert them from the fleet. Laying aside all thoughts of personal safety, he dove into the formation of Japanese planes. Wing-mounted .50 calibers blazed as he charged in, attacking one surprised enemy plane and then another. Butch wove in and out of the now broken formation and fired at as many planes as possible, until all his ammunition was finally spent. Undaunted, he continued the assault. He dove at the planes trying to clip a wing or tail in hopes of damaging as many enemy planes as possible, rendering them unfit to fly. Finally, the exasperated Japanese squadron took off in another direction. Deeply relieved, Butch O'Hare and his tattered fighter limped back to the carrier. Upon his arrival, he reported in and related the events surrounding his return. The film from the gun camera mounted on his plane told the tale. It showed the extent of Butch's daring attempt to protect his fleet. He had, in fact, destroyed 5 enemy aircraft. This took place on February the 20th, 1942. And for that action, Butch became the Navy's first ace of World War II and the first naval aviator to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. A year later, Butch was killed in aerial combat at the age of 29. His hometown would not allow the memory of this World War hero to fade, and today, O'Hare Airport in Chicago is named in tribute to the courage of Butch O'Hare. I mean, you know, and that is because O'Hare International Airport is a big one and a famous one, and so I wanted to thank Richard for both of those stories. You know, both of those stories talk about somebody whose concern was for the other person, you know, for the other people at whatever risk it was. And we see very little of that today. And there was one other part of this story here. Well, it says the next time you find yourself at O'Hare International Airport, give some thought to visiting Butch's memorial displaying his statue and his Medal of Honor. It's located between Terminals 1 and Terminals 2. So there's a guy who went through that many, many years ago, and O'Hare International Airport is named after him. And the one other thing that Richard reminded me of, and it's right here, and Butch O'Hare was Easy Eddie's son.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that neat? Butch O'Hare was Easy Eddie's son. So I thought that was a terrific story. Remember Paul Harvey on the radio? He used to say, "Now you know the rest of the story." Thank you, Richard, out in California. That was really great. Our last time here, we were continuing to focus on December the 21st, 2012, and I showed you the 8-spoked wheel, which curiously showed up in various prophecies of this time, as well as the geometric pattern that will occur, the constellations, on December the 21st, 2012 at 11:11 a.m. The eight-spoked wheel was very important because what's significant about it is that the eight-spoked wheel then involved Jesus Christ into the prophecy of 2012. And not only that, but if you can zoom in on this a bit, Kathy, it involves us in the prophecy of 2012 because this symbol has been on this lectern for 15, 20 years. And we didn't really know the tremendous implications of it. But this is what they look like, and this is what's so interesting about it. We'll look here. This is the Mayan calendar, and this was the symbol of the ancient Mayans calendar, and Pakal Votan, who was the first to predict December 21st, 2012. And if you look, you'll see the 8 points: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the Mayan calendar. Now, the next we will see here, I don't know what you hit. The next is this. This is the Buddhic calendar. It's not the Buddhic calendar. This is the Dharma wheel of Buddhism. And what's interesting about it is that it was Buddha also in 500 BC who said in 2,500 years there would be this great shaking and the coming of the second avatar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. The next thing that we saw, which was very interesting, is the alignment of the constellations. Now you can see this on the History Channel. The alignment of the constellations on December 21st, 2012 forms the 8-point or 8-spoke wheel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But that you can see in the History Channel. But that is the way that these constellations will line up at 11:11 on December the 21st, 2012. Another we had here was the book of Nostradamus, in which he called for the great shaking and consistently put the wheel of 8 in his prophecy. And then the last one, which is so interesting, is the Coptic key, which was given to Jesus from Jesus to the Gnostics in Egypt. And you can see here the 8-spoked wheel, which Jesus, according to this legend, named it Azozio, which actually means light filtered by crystal, or cosmic light. So the 8-spoked wheel it became very, very important, and all of these lead us back to this point of the great change, the great movement into Aquarius, and the time that the sun will align with the center of our galaxy on December the 21st, 2012. Now, if that all there was, and we've been faced with prophecies that we heard people talking about for years, and I don't know about you, I don't get involved in that. Somebody said, "Did you read this book? He says this." And well, who told him? Where is the scientific documentation to say something like that? But, it's more than just prophecies. We're living in a time of tremendous shaking, a great change. And it's leaving all of us to wonder what's coming next. You can't tell every day when you get up what is going to happen next. But the real question concerning what's coming next has to fall back on the more important questions of where it is coming from and why is it coming in the first place. And so that would say, is there some kind of an intelligence beyond us? Well, if we go to church or in religious circles, Christian, Jewish, they'll say, well, of course that's God or the spirits and so forth. But there is something, and what I have tried to do is identify that without using the religious terms, which are English words. And I mean, once you go beyond where we can see and physically interact, there are no English words. So it's a whole different type of mystery. But the first point I would like to address today is really a difficult one for a lot of people to get into, but let's try. It's called common sense. Common sense. In other words, what the heck's going on? And whenever I did as a little child question people at a religious school, they say, Master Donahue, you have to have faith. I didn't know what the heck that was. But none of this stuff ever seemed to be sensible to me. There's no common sense here. You see, I'm not talking about anything scientific that involves quantum physics or classical physics or religion or spirituality. No other forms of stuff. Just common sense. All right? And maybe we could take our first step. Let's do this. Let's try to use common sense by looking inside of a human head. Every head has the same stuff. Your head has the same stuff as his head and her head. Everybody's got the same stuff. And you know what? It is stuff. Organic meat stuff. Stuff that a lion would eat. Stuff that, it's like us. We enjoy eating liver, which is somebody else's stuff. People eat tongue or all this stuff, and it's all stuff. So let's take a look inside of a head. Don't get squeamish. It's all pictures. Inside of a head, and there it is. Look at inside of that head. There is stuff. If they could take a picture inside of your head, it would look the same. Not necessarily purple, but, it would look the same. Now, the common sense question is that stuff in there you? You see that stuff? Is this you? Is this what thinks and loves and hates and wishes and dreams? If that is, if that is you, then you are a meatball. You are a meat like you see in the shop right. And somebody programs you to run around. Give him a shot. Oh, I turn this way. Give him another. I turn. You're a robot because this is all stuff. You go down and you have a cheeseburger. It's the same stuff that's in there. So if that's you and me, it's all over. It is all over. Doesn't matter. Somebody has to be operating that stuff. Okay? Because that's all that's in there. If you take the most brilliant surgeon in the world and he cuts your head open and he looks inside, he won't find any ideas. Where's your thoughts? Where's your ideas? Where's your fears? Where's all? It ain't in there. You know what's in there? Stuff. So that's common sense. Common sense tells me that stuff is not you and it's not me. Now let's use some more common sense and look at this. Is a radiograph picture inside the human head. No matter how you may try, if they took a radiograph picture of you, it's the same thing. Notice there's nothing in here, but there is. But that's a radiograph picture, and everybody looks exactly the same. But does it make sense to you that all of this stuff can think and can dream and get ideas? It's just stuff. This is bone stuff. You give it to a dog, he can sit there for a week chewing on that. But it's just. So obviously the point that I'm trying to make is stuff is what is your body made of. That stuff is in there, and that's you. And you got to remember, your stuff is no different than anybody other stuff, and if they take your picture, they'll see the same thing. Now let's get a bit more graphic. Oh, Jesus, there's some more stuff. But that's you. Look at all of this stuff. Take a good look at it. What I want you to do is just say to yourself, is all of this what makes the decisions? Is all of this what's, it's not me. It's all of this stuff that's making the decisions. It's all of this stuff that gets fearful and gets depressed. Is the stuff getting depressed? Or are you? And the point is, are you and that stuff the same thing? Common sense, if it's ratcheting up on you, it's saying, wait a minute. Stuff doesn't have the ability to hope or to love or to be concerned. Let me show you the inside of a computer. You know what that is? Stuff. That is stuff. And you know what? None of that stuff is capable of doing anything unless there is some intelligent thing to operate it. That's a computer. That's the inside of a computer. It's not meat. It's plastic and metal stuff, as opposed to meat and bone stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's what it is, inside of a computer. That doesn't common sense tell you, now be honest, doesn't common sense tell you that in order for that computer to do anything, someone has to operate that stuff? Doesn't common sense tell you that whether it's metal and plastic or meat and bone, there has to be some kind of an external intelligence to use it? Because if nobody uses it, it's going to sit there. So let's take the computer and let's put it somewhere else to define what is going on. Let's take a look at you from a different perspective inside your head. And what do we see? Look at this. Why, my God, it's a computer in here. We took the meat and bone stuff and replaced it with the metal and plastic stuff, and we have a computer. And do you know what? That is exactly what it is. It's the most brilliant computer. You can't buy one like that. The most brilliant computer. It's just to give you an idea of what this thing sitting on top of your shoulders is. It's a computer. And it needs somebody to operate. Let's take a look at it side by side. And I think this will give you, here's the computer of plastic and metal, and there's the computer of meat and bone, side by side. You see what I'm saying? And in both instances, now look, a computer is a computer. Now, if we look over here, the one on the right is much more sophisticated than the one on the left. Stay over with this for a minute, Kath. On the slide. Both of those computers have one thing in common. They both require an intelligence to operate them. They cannot function unless something intelligent operates this or something intelligent operates that. If not, then neither of them can function. But they have one thing in common, and that is intelligence is required. In both cases, it's important to realize that the one who inputs this computer is you. And the one who inputs this computer is you. And you know that's just common sense because stuff is not capable. What I want you to do now, we're going to go to the next slide. We're going to look at the computers, and then we're going to look at you who operate them. The plastic and metal computer, the meat and bone computer, now a picture of you, the operator. There you are. You didn't know you were a blonde. That's a photon. That's you. And do you know what? We all look exactly the same. You are that. You are not this. You are that, and you operate the computer on the left, which is in your house, and the computer on the right, which is in your skull. And that's common sense. From out of a realm of dark matter comes the intelligence that operates the stuff and makes it happen. And in the middle of that picture, that yellow photon, you can see yourself. Joan, photon. Paul, photon. Vicky, photon. Charles, photon. Al, photon. Steve, photon. There you are. And common sense tells you that has to be you. Otherwise, the computer stuff on both sides couldn't work. So I was searching for common sense as we move forward, and I hope you agree that we have found some degree of common sense. Now, last week I was at the house, and Charles come over, and we're doing, what were we doing? I don't even know what we were doing. The telephone hookup or something. But after we got done, Charles and I sat for a while and discussed some of the things that we have been sharing. And Charles raised what I believe is a real excellent question. I always rely on the physicists and scientists that talk about parallel universes and twins that we have. And Charles said, well, how do they know that? I mean, it's just all based on mathematics. How do they know? How can they be so sure? When Charles left, I pondered that. And I was looking for a reasonable answer, since we're trying to use common sense and we're trying to use reason in this. And I think I've come up with a common sense answer to how these people know, but you'll have to be the final judge of that. How can scientists be sure of what exists in the invisible realm, and that there are parallel universes, and that we have twins, and that we exist in other universes besides this one at the same time? I'll show you a lot of the people that we have used as sources. They're very prestigious people, scientists and physicists. And we'll take a look at them. From left to right across the top, Max Tegmark, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And then there's Fred Alan Wolf, a magnificent physicist. The premier person in a voice about parallel universes is right in the middle, David Deutsch of Harvard University. And next to him is the late Carl Sagan and George Meek, a good physicist. I don't know his last name. I don't know any of the guys' last names. Branford, Hufford, Lilly. The guy at the very end, in this second row, is Oliver Lodge. And he goes back into old England time, 19th century and so forth. And then Paul Steinhardt at the very bottom here, on the left corner. Paul Steinhardt is the Einstein Emeritus Professor at Princeton University. And his statement to shake everybody up who will listen is, yes, parallel universes do exist, and they are more bizarre than any science fiction writer could ever dream. Next to Paul Steinhardt is Ron Pearson, and next to Pearson is Sir William Crookes. Sir William Crookes is back from the 19th century, ancient England, not ancient, but Old England, and William Crookes discovered, I forget what they call it, but the stuff that makes X-rays. And he took the first X-ray of his wife's hand. He was a brilliant, he was the most prestigious scientist in the 19th century. Anyhow, William Crookes attended a seance and brought back from the dead K.D. King. You can switch back up here. William Crookes brought back K.D. King. And K.D. King was a woman who had died. And not only did William Crookes bring her back to life in her dress and everything, he took her pulse. And so that all of the scientists and all the religious people in England said to him, "Sir William, are you trying to tell us it's possible for a woman to come back from the dead and you could take her pulse?" He said, "I didn't say it was possible. I said it happened." And just before he died, he came back into Parliament in England and he said, "I'm back, and I guess you thought I was back here to apologize and tell you it was all a hoax or a joke. I'm back here to tell you I don't pull back one word that I told you." And he walked away and died. So when I looked at William Crookes's credentials, credibility, I said, he is far too credible to have given up everything in his life for some hoax. You know who was sitting in the room with William Crookes when K.D. King appeared? I don't know if you ever heard of him. His name is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He wrote Sherlock Holmes. He was there. Neat stuff. But still the question is, how do these people know? And Charles' question is, well, how do they know? Based on a bunch of numbers? Let's consider something. Will you agree, in this audience and you in TV, that these people know things that we do not know because of their studies and their training? I mean, and it's true. It's true. And think about yourself now. You know things that other people do not know because of your experience and your studies and your training. So let's divide the room, in this room here. Let's say that you people on the right side are these scientists, and you know things that the people on the left side don't know. They don't know what the hell's going on. They go to church and they have no idea what's going on. So all they can ever do is ask. And so what the people on the left side are saying about the people on the right side, how do they know? How do they know? Well, let me take something that the people on the right side know. Now let's pretend you know this stuff. And let's pretend you don't know anything. It's the first time you've ever heard that. Okay? The people on the right side who are the physicists that Charles remarked about. Now the first picture you're going to show here is a lamp, a wall lamp. Okay? Well, the people on the left side can see it. Yeah, we can see it. That's all we know. It's a lamp. But the people on the right side know that because that lamp is there, it's visible, it means that there is something invisible. What is invisible that they can't see? Look, everybody in the left side, you see? Let me show you what else is over here that you can't see that's invisible. Go ahead. Why, it's wires. There are wires in the wall. And what do these people on the left side say? What's a wire? We never heard of that. Look at Joan. She doesn't know what a wire is. I don't believe there are such things as wires. Do you, John? That's one part of the invisible thing. And now the people on the right side said there's something else that you can't see. What is it? It's a power station somewhere out in space. You know, nuts. But do you see the point here? Charles says, you know that because there's a visible light, there has to be wiring that we can't see. There has to be a power station that we can't see. You know for sure. So now we have to think, wait a minute. If there's a visible light, that visible light could not exist without the other two things. Right? Absolutely. One could not exist without the other two. Now let's look at this again. And I'm going to stay away from it. Charles, you just stay around. Let us look again. We have to consider those who are scientists. Do you see the point I'm making, though? The scientists know things that you don't know. They know that because something is here, there has to be something else. In the same way, because the light is here, there has to be wires. There has to be a power station. Okay? So let's take a look here. And then, Charles, and you just stay on the picture. Okay, what do we see first? This is a woman. All right? Very nice. We know that women exist, and let's do it again, and we'll see something else, and we know that men exist. A very intelligent-looking young guy, if I ever saw one. Okay. But now, do you see them? You know that they exist, don't you? And the difference is, we know what powers the lamps, but we don't know what powers us. But we have the same hints, Joan. You need two, there and there. So, you see, the lamp, we all know, don't we? We know there's got to be wires that are invisible, and we know there's got to be a power station that's invisible. Well, you've got two electric beings right below it, but you haven't a clue what powers them, do you? I mean, check behind you. Is there any wire plugged into the wall? Of course not. The Bible says that life began by the splitting of the atom. That's when God took a rib out of Adam. That's an ionic bond. And we also know that the Bible says that we are light because God is light. But science goes in a different direction. Knowing that we are all atoms, and that's what you are, you're atoms, that's why the first person is named Adam, there is no doubt about that, as there is no doubt about those wall lamps. See, a David Deutsch in Harvard will say, well, you people know that if the lamp is lit, there has to be wires and there has to be a power station. But David Deutsch says something else. And look what he says. To the extent that your decisions depend on random events, there are indeed other equally real versions of you in other universes. How do you know that, Dave? They choose differently and are now enduring the consequences. When you're going to bed tonight, your other self is getting up. That's why you get involved in all that crazy stuff that you think you're dreaming. You're not. You're really there. Photons, atoms, and quantum computations have invisible, differently behaving counterparts, but you still cling to the belief that you exist in only one copy. Now, this is how David knows. Just like you know the lamps have to have wires and a power station, David says, that makes no sense because you are made of atoms, and if they have invisible counterparts, so must you. It's not a question whether you exist in another place. You go to bed tonight, and you're going to be there, and you're going to be running around all kinds of crazy stuff, and there you are. But you're no longer going to be in the bed. Body, yes, but not photon you. So what David says is, I'll tell you, Charles, how I know. Because you're an atom. You're atoms. And your atoms have invisible counterparts, which means you have to. It can't be. You cannot exist unless you don't have a counterpart, in the same way that that light cannot exist unless it has wires and a power station. So how does this work out? How does this work out? John, there's a few things you're going to have. First of all, we have the light. We know that since we have the light, we must have invisible counterparts. We must have wires, and we must have a power station. Everybody agree? You do agree. But what about us? David Deutsch says, since we are atoms, we have unseen counterparts, that since the atoms have twins, we have to have them too. Now, so, there we have young lady. And what is she? She's atoms. You ready for this now? Those atoms have counterparts. They have twins. They have duplicates, Joan. What does that mean, Joan? She does too. Do you get it? Does it make sense? Does it make common sense as to how David Deutsch and how these guys know? Because that girl there and you and me are atoms which are above, and those atoms have duplicates of themselves, which means she and you and I have duplicates of ourselves as well. It is as sure as the fact that these lights have to have wiring and a power station. You can't have lights without the power station and the wiring, and you can't have people without atoms and twins. It's not possible. Now, I want to spend just a wee bit of time on atom twins. I'm not going to go into detail, and I'll tell you why I'm not going to go into detail. I don't understand what the hell these people are talking about for the most part. But I just pulled out enough. So that, we would know. This stuff goes over my head because unless you're trained, you don't. But I pulled out a couple of things I felt would give us some inkling as to the nature of atoms and why the scientists conclude we all have twins in parallel universes. Remember, those atoms are you, and here you will see one of the earliest experiments dating back into the late 1800s and why the scientists involved were shocked and surprised. And John, let's take a look at it. Nuclear twins. The site, I want to give the site credit, www.davidparker.com. Nuclear twins, the discovery of proton and neutron. Soddy asked his colleague Alexander Fleck to analyze the decay products of uranium and thorium. I don't know what he's talking about. He then compared Fleck's results to the periodic table. He noticed, ready for this, that when an element emitted an alpha particle, it produced an element 2 places to the left. An element that emitted electrons produced an element 1 place to the right. And then it says, if this seems confusing, imagine how it must have seemed to people observing it for the first time. You know what I'm saying? They're giving birth to themselves. This is a long document on the website, and I just pulled out this short paragraph because it says something about our inner being. The atom element is creating copies of itself, 2 places to the left, 1 place to the right. This is the neat part. This is going on inside of you right now as you're sitting here. There are little atoms and electrons inside saying, Sydney, 2 to the left, please. Morgan, 1 to the right. Yes, that's true. You don't know that's going on, do you? You don't know all these little intelligent things are inside of you moving around. 2 places. But look, you go. How many of you ate today? You had something to eat, didn't you? When you stuck something in your mouth, do you know what? After you put it in your mouth, it is none of your damn business what goes on after that. Does it? You have no clue what happened. there's all the little people inside of you saying, ship some of it over to the blood. We need a little of that. The hair's getting a little thin. Let's ship it a little bit. What? You have nothing whatsoever to do with it. You know why? Because you are two beings. You are the physical being sitting here, but you're the light being. We'll get into that. So in the same way as if you had a piece of cake and then it's gone, this function operates without your interference. And it is actually producing copies of yourself to the left and to the right. Very, very strange things go on inside of us without our knowledge. You want to show you something? I'm going to show you something really neat. Your being knows what you want to see, even when what you are looking at is not what you think it is. Whew. You're like, what the hell's he talking about? I don't know. But your being will simply allow you to see what you want to see, even when you're looking at something totally different. Charles, I want you to, when Joan gets ready, puts this on. Now, don't yet, John. This is what I want you to do. Please do this. As soon as it comes on, I want you to start reading this loud. Everybody say okay. Okay. Oh. All right. Now, I want you to read this out loud as soon as it comes on. Joan? According to a research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letters be at the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can all still read it without problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Not one word is spelled right. You had no problem reading the whole damn thing, did you? Isn't that amazing? Once you go to school and take spelling for it, it doesn't count. Yeah? As soon as that came on the board, you read it. Didn't you? You didn't have to think twice about it. And so what happened here was this thing knew what it was that you were going to want to say, even though it doesn't say what it's supposed to say on the screen. That is neat. So here you looked at words that were not what you were saying, but you knew what they were saying, even though they weren't the words that they should have been. What you saw was something different than what you said. But what you said was right, even though what you saw was wrong. Let me say that again. I think that's pretty neat. What you saw was something different than what you said. But what you said was right, even though what you saw was wrong. Now, you didn't have to have any training to do that. Wouldn't it be something? The kids go to school Monday mornings, teacher, that's not the way you spell problem. It's P-O-R-B-E-L-M. The next article on atoms comes from a website called Technology Review, and it has to do with the makeup of the atomic structure of copper, of which I know nothing. But there's something commented on concerning the atoms in the copper, and I think it's worthwhile for us to share it. John? Technologyreview.com. I mean, if you want to, check on me and see if I'm, you can go. That's why you. John? The new version of copper contains another set of boundaries called twins. These occur inside a grain when atoms on either side of an imaginary line are mirror images of each other. The researchers found that the twins resist the movement of the atoms, making the material stronger. But even if the force is too great for the twin boundary to stop the atoms from moving, the material doesn't break apart because the atoms are lined up in an orderly way. Rather, the displaced atoms are absorbed on the other side of the boundary. And, I know, and I don't know anything about copper, and I don't know much about what he's talking about and so forth and so on. All I want you to see is the reality of atomic twins, two of the same, just like you and me, and yet separated apart. We don't cross the boundary. Did you get that? They cannot cross the boundary. You don't cross the boundary. When you go to bed tonight, unknowns to you, your brain is going to disconnect from your body, and that leaves you free to carry out what you're going to be doing in your other existence in a parallel universe. Otherwise, you'd be running around and getting all screwed up doing these things. And sometimes you see it happen, where the connection is not made fully, and you'll see a person get up and they're sleepwalking or something. Over and over again, twins. And that's why David Deutsch says, if atoms had twins, and they do, since you are atoms, you have to have. So you figure you're worrying about dying? You can't. Only bodies die. And we proved it. Common sense, all of that junk and all of that stuff, that's not you. I mean, when your car breaks down and it's got to go to the junkyard, are they going to take you with it in the trunk? Of course not. Are you going to go up and pray over it? Throw flowers on your old 1952 Ford? I had one of those. Of course not. There's no way to get out of it. There are numerous copies of you, and you know that by what you think are dreams, when you're really, really, really shutting down to move into a different parallel universe. And so we see why these scientists know, because they simply can say, hey, if this exists and we can see it, we know that this invisible has to exist, because number one cannot exist without number two. Had you ever thought of this? How old would you be if you died here and then were in heaven or some mystical place that religion made up, and you met your mother? Would your mother be younger than you? I mean, if you die and you're 85, my father died when he was 40. And if I meet him, is he going to be 40 and I'm going to be hobbling along at 85? Hi, Dad. What? Do you ever think of that? We try to consider, see, here's where we get in trouble. We go to church. And in churches, we try to consider these things that are real with a primitive mentality. And so, in order to get us to just forget about what's real, they have us sing songs and believe in talking snakes and virgins and all of this stuff. Just believe it. I believe. That's true. But we have no understanding of ourselves or the existence we find ourselves in. Take a look at this, and maybe it will convince you to go into meditation and shut up and stop trying to figure things out. This is from a website called the Electron Centennial Page, and I think it's pretty interesting. But this is true. You ready? Let's go. Joe? Let's imagine that twins Ann and Betty are both astronauts. Ann travels to Alpha Centauri, the nearest star to the sun, and comes back. Ann's speed during her trip to Alpha Centauri is 90% of the speed of light. Betty stays at home on Earth while Ann visits Alpha Centauri. When Ann comes back in 9.8 years, she has only gotten 4.3 years older due to time dilation. Time goes slower in Ann's spacecraft than on Earth. So Ann comes back and she's 5.5 years younger than her sister twin. If you went past Alpha Centauri, you would come back and your friend who is the same age as you are now would be 87 and you would be 32. And you would come back and say, what the heck happened to you? Look, Let me show you then the next one here. In her spacecraft, Anne, she's up there in the space. She can see Betty getting further and further and then closer as she turns around. If only the relative speed is taken into account, time dilation should work also the other way around, and Anne should notice that Betty is getting older. But Anne's not. Betty stayed all the time in the same inertial frame of reference, while Anne switched from one inertial frame to another when she left, and then turned around and landed back on Earth. Because of this, Betty is now older than Anne. And yet the same amount of time went by for both of them. I love this stuff when people try to tell you things as if they know what they're talking about. Joan, there is no need for the fountain of youth anymore. If you want to stay young and beautiful, just travel across space and come back on Earth. When others get older, you will stay young and beautiful, taking into account that you were beautiful before you left. And this guy said, I am not interested in slowing down my aging. Being younger than my children would be too surreal. Anyhow, the twins' paradox is interesting. It is amazing that in principle you can slow down your aging by traveling in space. It is awesome. So I think, it's really, isn't it an amazing thing? And we don't know that. Of course, it doesn't have any effect on us per se, because we don't know anything about astronauts. We don't know anything about traveling into space. But yet, like Charles said when we were talking about this is what really goes on. This is what life is. But what do we do? Do we know about this? No. You don't know about that. But you do know how to sing Rock of Ages, up the tree, la da dee 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 dee. What the? But you don't know anything about that. So, when you go zipping out into space, when you arrive, you're going to be a lot younger. So if we take what we've seen today about ourselves, the facts from a scientific standpoint say that we are two beings. We are a human being making earthly, three-dimension decisions, and we are a light being whose decisions are made automatically without any input from us. Okay? And so what we can do is, again, look at the nuclear twin thing that we looked at a little earlier. And I think, it's well worth it too. Because we are two. You see, this is the interesting part. Boy meets a girl. Girl meets a boy. Oh, they fall in love. They're making decisions. It could be beautiful. It could be a nightmare. But they're making the decision. But what's going on inside of you now with the electrons and the atoms? They are making space decisions. They are making light decisions, God decisions, if you will. And you have no control over that. So what's it say? We looked at it before, Joan. Nuclear twins. Soddy asked his colleague to analyze the decay. He compared Fleck's results. Noticed when an element emitted an alpha particle, it produced an element two places to the left. An element emitted electrons produced an element one place to the right. And is the electron producing the element to the right following the Jesus statement? Just think of that. Inside of you, when you stimulate all this and you excite these electrons in your meditation, the particles are throwing to the right and to the left. Okay, let's take a look again at the scientific structure. When an element emitted an alpha particle, it produced an element two places to the left. An element that emitted electrons produced an element one place to the right. Now, Jesus is saying, cast your net on the right side of the ship and you'll find. So you see, inside of yourself, the atom and neutron and electron activity is shifting information to the right, but you're staying on the left. You only can get to the right when you go into meditation and shut down your thoughts. Then you become part of the information that your atoms and electrons have been placing over to the right. Most of us stay with the left and we get involved in all the bizarre things that people do, not knowing that this information is being shipped to the right as well as to the left. And Jesus says, cast it to the right side. So is nature doing automatically what he instructs us to do voluntarily? And how are you going to get the message that those electrons are flipping over to the right unless you go there? And how are you going to go there unless you go in meditation? So anyway, it's obvious that things go on inside us and around us without our knowledge for an intelligent purpose. Things happen that must happen either to extend the life of the species or to extend the life of the universe itself. Well, it's the same thing. We were talking about if you have twins, you got to have another twin. Well, that's right. The entire Earth is atoms, and so it has to be another Earth in a parallel universe. It has to. Things seem to correct automatically what has been done voluntarily, and is not this the idea put forth by Paschal Wotan about December 21st, 2012? What? Voluntarily, the human race will become so absorbed with material and industrial things that they will lose their interdependence with nature. We don't know. See, we don't realize that the earth is alive. So we pour cement on it. We pour blacktop on it. Who cares? The hell with it, yeah? We have no interdependence with nature whatsoever. But there is a point at which the invisible intelligence we have seen as photon and electron are going to do something that must be done if we don't voluntarily do it. You get what I'm saying? The invisible side is going to do what must be done, even when we fail to do it voluntarily. And in that case, what could happen relevant to this great shaking? Now, you ready for this? I know children don't come here, and people don't bring children here. And if they did, I would tell them to take the children out now, because, you know, what negative aspects could we experience? I'm not a gloom and doom person, and you know that. I've always put forth the proposal that the great shaking to culminate on December the 21st, 2012, which we are experiencing now, will save us, end the planet, and restore us to a more peaceful and feminine style rather than the masculine, warlike style we've been living in for thousands of years. I'm not here to frighten anyone, and I wouldn't move to include this into the presentation in front of children or anybody else, but I do believe that people who choose to consider these proposals being more mature than most of them on the outside who are singing songs are ready to look at the negative possibilities, and I include you among those. When I first began the 2012 discussions, I showed you the statements from the National Aeronautics and Space Agency concerning the forecasts for the period of 2011-2012. Joe? That's science from NASA, the Range Solar Forecast, National Center for Atmospheric Research, okay? And that's the conveyor belt kind of with the sun, the core of the sun, northern branch, and so forth, Joe. A team led by physicist Masumi Dikpada of the National Center for Atmospheric Research has predicted that cycle 24, this is the sun storm cycle 24, peaking in 2011 or 2012, will be intense. Hathaway agrees. Cycle 24 will be strong. Cycle 25 will be weak. The cycle being discussed is the sunstorm cycle, which they predict will be intense, peaking in 2011 or 2012 when Paschal Wotan called for the great shaking. John? Science NASA, scientists predict big solar cycle. Evidence is mounting. The next solar cycle is going to be a big one. Solar cycle 24, due to peak in 2010 or 11, looks like it's going to be one of the most intense cycles since record keeping began 400 years ago, says solar physicist David Hathaway of the Marshall Space Flight Center. He and colleague Robert Wilson presented this conclusion last week at the American Geophysical Union meeting in San Francisco. I'm not throwing New Age people at you. I'm not throwing smoke and feathers at you. I'm not throwing prophets. I'm throwing the most intellectual, scientific people who work with NASA and so forth. Now, when this sun goes through this most intense solar activity, 2011 and 2012, what else is going to happen? The sun does a flip. John? February, you can't tell by looking, but scientists say the sun has just undergone an important change. Our star's magnetic field has flipped. The sun's magnetic poles will remain as they are now, with the north magnetic pole pointing through the sun's southern hemisphere until the year 2012, when they will reverse again. The transition happens every 11 years. And so, okay, it's a normal thing. But it's going to be right in the middle of the greatest solar sunstorm since records have been kept. A website called New Scientist discussed this issue, and it's worth pointing. Now, let me tell you something before we get into this. I would in no way present this to you unless the credibility of it was absolutely impeccable. And so I want to tell you, because I don't believe in gloom and doom stuff, but you have to be prepared, just like if the weatherman says something, you have to be prepared. This report that you are about to see was paid for and authorized by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. The report was put together by NAS, which is the National Association of Science, which includes 300 and so of the most prestigious scientists in the world and in this country. Okay? Let's look at it. The National Academy of Sciences, NAS, is an honorific society of distinguished scholars engaged in scientific and engineering research, dedicated to the furtherance of science and technology and to their use for the general welfare. The NAS was signed into being by President Abraham Lincoln on March 3, 1863, at the height of the Civil War. As mandated in its act of incorporation, the NAS has since 1863 served to investigate, examine, experiment, and report upon any subject of science or art whenever called upon to do so by any department of the government. Now, this is the report that the National Academy of Science presented to NASA. Now, remember, we had just seen a report about the concern issued concerning the solar storms predicted for 2011 and 2012. Okay? Space storm alert, 90 seconds from catastrophe. Okay? It is midnight on 22nd September 2012, and the skies above Manhattan are filled with a flickering curtain of colorful light. Few New Yorkers have seen the aurora this far south, but their fascination is short-lived. Within a few seconds, electric bulbs dim and flicker, then become unusually bright for a fleeting moment. Then all the lights in the state go out. Within 90 seconds, the entire eastern half of the United States is without power. Joan? A year later, and millions of Americans are dead. And the nation's infrastructure lies in tatters. The World Bank declares America a developing nation. Europe, Scandinavia, China, and Japan are also struggling to recover from the same fateful event. A violent storm 150 million kilometers away on the surface of the sun. It sounds ridiculous. Surely the sun couldn't create so profound a disaster on Earth, yet an extraordinary report funded by NASA and issued by the United States National Academy of Sciences claims it could do just that. Here is an artist rendering of what your Earth that you are living on right now will look like if the solar comes this way. Joe? This is planet Earth. The blue-green marble is changed. What I want to do is go back to the prophecy of Pakal Votan before we continue to read the report from New Scientist. It is eerie, and it has to give you pause to consider this seriously. Joe? Pakal Votan? Pakal Votan knew that humanity would be disconnected from the laws of the natural world and would fall ignorant of our sacred interdependence with nature. He foretold of our accelerated technological society and the resulting damage of our collective divergence from natural law in exchange for materialist values. Now, considering what Pakal Votan said about the Great Shaking, let's see now what the report from these scientists say, and try to digest that each one is spoken, though 2,000 years apart. Pakal Votan, 600 A.D., and the scientists now. Joan? Over the last few decades, Western civilizations have busily sown the seeds of their own destruction. Isn't that what Pakal Votan said in 600? And that's what the scientists are saying now. Our modern way of life, with its reliance on technology, has unwittingly exposed us to an extraordinary danger. Plasma balls spewed from the surface of the sun could wipe out our power grids with catastrophic consequences. The projections of just how catastrophic make chilling reading. We're moving closer and closer to the edge of a possible disaster, says Daniel Baker, a space weather expert based at the University of Colorado in Boulder and chair of the NAS committee responsible for the report. You see what it says here? We have invited ourselves into mass extinction. How could we survive without computers? Imagine no cell phones, no computers, no TV, no radio. You'd have to begin living with nature again. You'd have to begin talking to one. You have to start interacting with people again. The warring nations would have to go back to spears. And which would be good, because then they could only kill each other, not everybody else who would just happen to be hanging around. The problem is, we have industrialized totally on the basis of what good it would do for industry and business and profit with no regard for nature, just like Pakal Votan said, and just like these scientists say. We do it in every town. We cut down the trees. We blacktop the earth to get as many material-based businesses jammed together as we can. And we never consider nature and the fact that the earth is alive and that its animals should not be subject to such torture. When Al Gore warns about global warming, stupid politicians say global warming is not man-made. This is how stupid they are. Of course it's not man-made. But what is man-made is the pollution into the atmosphere that makes natural global warming much worse than it is naturally supposed to be. But the problem here is more than simply doing without conveniences. You know? From a scientific perspective, such solar storms would be ones we would want to survive. However, the prognosis from the scientists is that thanks to our technological prowess, many of us may not survive. There are two problems to face. The first is the modern electricity grid, which is designed to operate at ever higher voltages over ever larger areas. The high-powered grids act as a particularly efficient antenna, channeling enormous direct currents into the power transformer. See what Votan said and see what they're saying? Yeah, you can have the power grids, but you better understand that nature has a power grid too, and how are the two going to interact? But we disregarded nature. See, we brought antennas and power grids that is going to bring us into the solar storm power with devastating energy. In other words, our power grids are going to be antennas to draw this stuff in. We never paid any attention to that because we don't care. We don't think that nature does stuff like that. Just as Paco Votan said, Joe. The second problem is the grid's interdependence with the systems that support our lives: water, sewage, supermarket delivery, infrastructures, power station controls, financial markets. Everything relies on electricity. Put the two together, and it is clear that such an event could produce a catastrophe the likes of which the world has never seen. According to the NAS report, a severe space weather event in the United States could induce ground currents that would knock out 300 key transformers within about 90 seconds, cutting off the power for more than 130 million people, and from that moment the clock is ticking for America. Notice the statement about the power grid's interdependence with the industrial and business system. Now, what did Paco Votan say? Oh, yeah, you have the interdependence with the business system, but you lost your interdependence with nature. Joe? First to go immediately for some people is drinkable water. Anyone living in a high-rise apartment where water has to be pumped to reach them would be cut off straightway. For the rest, drinking water would still come through the taps for maybe half a day. With no electricity to pump water from reservoirs, there's no more after that. There's simply no electrically powered transport, no trains, underground or overground. Our just-in-time culture for delivery networks may represent the pinnacle of efficiency, but it means that supermarket shelves would empty very quickly. Delivery trucks could only keep running until their tanks ran out of fuel, and there is no electricity to pump anymore from the underground tanks at filling stations. Joe? Backup generators would run at pivotal sites, but only until their fuel ran out. For hospitals, that would mean about 72 hours of running a bare-bones essential care-only service. With no power for heating, cooling, or refrigeration systems, people could begin to die within days. In the U.S. alone, there are 1 million people with diabetes, and Keplerman says shut down production, distribution, and storage, and you put all those lives at risk in very short order. Nobody ever thought of that, but Paco Votan did. Joan? So what should be done? No one knows yet. The report is meant to spark that conversation. Baker is worried, though, and this is the point, and God, Baker is worried that the odds are stacked against that conversation really getting started. As the science report notes, it is terribly difficult to inspire people to prepare for a potential crisis that has never happened before. It takes a lot of effort to educate policymakers. Well, I'm a Republican and the Democrats said it, so I don't believe it. Well, Senator Clyghorn, read that. We should learn the lessons, it says here, of Hurricane Katrina and realize that unlikely doesn't mean it won't happen, especially when the stakes are so high. The fact is, you ready for this? When is 2012? What is this, 29? The fact is it could come in the next 3 or 4 years and with devastating effects. These aren't Paco Votan kind of people. They're not people who know of the 8-spoked wheel, of Buddha, Nostradamus, and Jesus. This is the National Academy of Science. And they said 3 or 4 years. We know the bees are going away. What did Albert Einstein say? When the bees go, you got 4 years left. Who's doing anything about it? Nobody. And all this brings us to that culmination date of Paco Votan of 2012. You see where it says, it is terribly difficult to inspire people to prepare for a potential crisis that has never happened before. Let us take a look at the Bible. Maybe now we'll know what they were talking about. John? Go ahead. Matthew 24, but as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and they had no idea until the flood came and took them all away. Okay? Oh, I'm busy. I can't worry about that solar stuff. I got to go to the football game. I got a date. I can't worry about it. They had no idea until it took them all away. And so I'm going to wrap it up. It's over. But I want to take the Bible words about Noah, take the words of the National Academy of Science, and place them together so maybe you get the message. Joe? National Academy of Science. As the NAS report notes, it is terribly difficult to inspire people to prepare for a potential crisis that has never happened before. It takes a lot of effort to educate policy makers. Joe? They were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and they had no idea until the flood came and took them away. This is deadly serious. I'm telling you, what you sat here and looked at was not some New Age bookstore or smoke shop or people looking at crystal. It wasn't any of that. No prophets, no prophecy. What you just saw was the work of the National Academy of Science, paid for and organized by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The Bible Noah story was not true. It's mythology. But what is it telling you? You better heed the warning, and you better build your ark of safety. Please do not go in the backyard and start banging wood together. What you have to do is realize that your ark is here. The ark is in the right side, inside of the stuff, and you, through your meditation, have got to start to build that ark. Because if this comes, what they said, may not, but if this comes what they said, you're going to need that instruction. You're going to need that direction. You're going to need that light from the higher to guide you in what you must do and what you should do. Messages have been coming to me hot and heavy. And I never say that to anybody because I don't want you thinking anything special, but I get stuff. And they've been coming hot and heavy, and they encourage you to make sure you're doing your inner electrical work that we call meditation, and you'll be aware, and there'll be a place in the ark for you. And I'm going to cover all of this as we go along. Remember the poor unicorn? They were fooling around. And the ark left without them. Stop fooling around. Start taking this serious. As I said, what you saw here today is credible. It's from the largest scientific organization in the world, and NASA. Take it serious. Stop playing around like the unicorns and build your ark of meditation so that you are lifted above all of this and set foot out of your ark onto the mountaintop. See ya. Bye-bye. Okay.